Yeah, so I think in terms of the messaging piece, I think SaaS brands need to stop shoving their product down people's throats. This is a problem I see all the time. And it's usually like when you're paying for advertising, you're usually telling people, look at our product, we save you time, we save you money, but you need to focus on something other than that.
Hi, Rami. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great too. Thank you for accepting my invite and being here after a lot of back and forth.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
And how is work?
It's going pretty good. Smoothly overall. Not too bad.
Great, great.
How about
So
you?
this podcast was, pretty much inspired from our last conversation that we had, the informal, where I was really impressed with the branding that you're doing for the SaaS businesses. So I thought it would be an amazing idea to have you here and, speak more on the SaaS branding specifically. So, like I was researching actually on Google and I saw that there are 3,000 SaaS businesses globally, which is like a huge number of SaaS businesses. Now, how can one SaaS business differentiate from its competitor through branding?
Yeah. So I think in this case, it's really about authenticity, especially recently, like in modern brands like 2023 and moving forward. You see a lot more, a lot less produced content coming out. So instead of seeing these like big billboard ads or these giant, Super Bowl type things with celebrities, etc., you're seeing people just pick up their phone now and talk about a product, and it's some sort of influencer on TikTok or something like that. So differentiating right now is really about telling an authentic story. So as a founder, as a brand, if you can find a way to really tap into your audience and tell either your founder story or tell your customer story in a way that's native to the platforms that they're on. For example, like if you're on LinkedIn, just make a text post or something along those lines. YouTube, make a video. You don't need to spend millions of dollars anymore on advertising. And when you do, it actually turns people away from your product because it looks inauthentic. It looks like you're trying to sell them something rather than trying to help them in a valuable way.
So I was recently speaking to someone, a SaaS founder, wherein I was working with him on the branding angle. And when I was working on his messaging, he said that the way all these SaaS businesses pretty much work on one of the two factors. Either they help the user save time or they help them save money.
Right.
Okay. So now, while the crux remains the same, since you've mentioned authenticity, can you like elaborate a little and tell me on how can they remain authentic and have this crux and, pan out their messaging?
Yeah. So I think in terms of the messaging piece, I think SaaS brands need to stop shoving their product down people's throats. This is a problem I see all the time. And it's usually like when you're paying for advertising, you're usually telling people, look at our product, we save you time, we save you money, but you need to focus on something other than that. A good example is Buffer. If the scheduling app. What they used to do is they used to just have blog content out that was just about social media strategy. So how do you grow an audience? How do you, that kind of stuff. But then they realized that their audience already had a captive audience. So like, all the people that were using Buffer already had an audience on LinkedIn or on YouTube, etc. So Buffer switched up their blog content and started talking about psychology. They started talking about, creativity, multitasking, things like that, things that these people would find more valuable. And switching that focus and to be more customer focused, to bring the value in something other than their product, got their name out there and got people interested in Buffer. And so when it was time for them to make a purchase, like to think about a scheduling app, Buffer was the first person to come to mind. And they never had to say, we save you time, we save you money. They helped in a more authentic way.
So it's a lot of the content game that the SaaS businesses should focus on while ensuring that their core service is being conveyed subtly and in a most authentic way possible.
Right. I think it's about telling a story. So having, Buffer's whole thing is like, we're your kind of like your partner, your content partner. And a content partner does more than provide a product. They also provide advice, they provide consulting, and that's the kind of thing that Buffer's doing with their blog content. And I feel like a lot of SaaS businesses can do the same.
Fair enough. That's an interesting one. So what are the key elements of branding that a SaaS business needs to like for sure consider before they hop onto the first round of beta testing users?
So in terms of branding, I think at this point, it's kind of a research stage, especially when your product is still in kind of this beta phase. So do one-on-one interviews, do a lot of market research. So figure out your industry, understand, where is the industry going? What are the trends? And do some social listening too. So, I mean, if you have, their Twitter trackers, things like that, see what people are saying about your competitors, and figure out the gaps that you can fill. So at this point, while you're beta testing, while you're doing all that, you're doing brand research at the same time. So you're getting to know your audience, you're getting to know your market. So by the time your product is set up and ready to go, you can employ a solid brand strategy around it. Because I don't think it's very smart to start a brand strategy process before you have a solid product, because that's the base of your entire brand. So once you're beta testing, I think that's the research phase. Once it's out of beta, then you go into your strategy.
Okay. So you recommend getting the beta testing done first and the market research, and then getting into brand strategy.
Right. Because if your product isn't good at the end of the day, if it's still in beta, or if it's not, perfect, or it doesn't have to be perfect, but if it's not good enough, then you lose trust, because when people go and actually buy your product and they have this huge promise through your brand strategy, if you can't deliver on that promise, you lose trust, you lose customers at the end.
Fair enough. That's a different take that I had, that I've heard for the first time, where someone has mentioned go for beta testing first and then brand strategy, which is a different take. So thank you for sharing that. So now that we're talking about, branding and SaaS and everything, I want to understand, how can a SaaS business integrate branding into their product once, say, they are out of the beta testing phase? And what are the social media platforms that they can perhaps use?
Yeah. So at this point, so let's say you got out of beta testing, you've done your research now, you've done your one-on-one interviews, your competitive research, the gaps you're filling in the market. So at this point, it's about using all this data that you have to create kind of a customer experience framework, essentially. So what this means is, put together true to life personas. So 2 to 3 people that represent your brand, and, what motivates them, what gets them moving, what are their values, things like that. Also understand their goals and their endpoints. And then from there, it's about mapping out your brand touch points. So let's say your website's like the center, right? So how are we going to get people to our website? So we have, our newsletter, we have a blog, we have et cetera, maybe a LinkedIn profile, mapping all those pieces out, and then developing a clear message. So now you know your audience, you know where you're trying to go. What's your core message, and how are you going to convey that through all those different touch points? And then from there, it's about, I think, company culture too is really important. I think the people that represent your brand should all have a consistent look and feel and talk the same, and all of that should be consistent. Once you have that all mapped out, it's about implementing that. So go to your different touch points and do one at a time. Check the messaging there, check if it matches one of your target personas, and go through the checklist for each one of your pieces of content. From there, you develop essentially a hub that gets people straight back to your website, and each piece of content is very consistent throughout.
Okay. So it's about ensuring that your messaging across touch points starts getting consistent, right?
Right. And it's also about telling a good story too, because I feel like that's the big piece of brand strategy. I feel like brand strategy is telling your story, and marketing is getting it out there. So I feel like if you focus on world building over product building, I feel like that's a really good way of looking at things. So, who are the characters of your story? What's the core idea of this universe, which means what's your mission, vision, values? Who are the characters? Like what are your touch points? Who are the people involved? And then how can we convey this core idea through those different characters? And I feel like if you look at it as more of a story, it's easier to see, because you look at things like Buffer, and there's also a company called Typeform, which has an app called Video Ask, and they recently put out a video, and there's a new app that they're releasing, relatively new, and they put out a video that's interactive. So as you go through the video, you make choices for the characters, and that's entertaining, and that brings value to people other than their product, and it brings their name to people's mind. So focusing on telling a story, focusing on building your brand like a story, I think is a really unique way of looking at brand strategy, and something that works really well too.
Interesting. I knew about Typeform. I did not know about their new product. So thank you for sharing that info with me. Yeah. I'll just go to the second bit of the question. That is, which social media platforms would you recommend for a SaaS business that is just starting on with their beta testing process to drive traffic to their website?
I think it depends on the type of SaaS business. So if you're B2B, I think LinkedIn is your place to be, because that's where you're going to find the bigger companies that are willing to buy, larger packages, things like that. I think if you're B2C, so more consumer based, I honestly think Instagram and TikTok is your place. Which sounds, people are pretty apprehensive to that idea, but I feel like that's where things are going. Especially video content now is doing the best on all platforms, and most platforms are pushing it. So if you can get ahead on something like TikTok or Instagram, I think choosing one is important too. And that comes down to your customer research, figure out where they're hanging out. Younger audience is usually TikTok, a little bit older is Instagram. So it's choosing the right one between those two, and then really hammering home video content. And make it authentic. Like I was saying before, you don't need to overproduce this stuff. I mean, you can get people with maybe 10,000 followers. You can pay somebody like that to just talk about your product, and it doesn't have to, they can just hold their phone up and talk about it. And things like that work a lot better now than they used to.
What would be your take on Twitter? Because I usually get a lot of DMs from a lot of SaaS founders, for whom the target audience is freelancers, to sign up for their beta testing phase of the product. So do you think Twitter is a good place for that?
I think yes, that's especially for beta testing, but it also depends on the size of your audience. So if you have a large audience that's going to be using Twitter to talk to you, because that's the main idea for Twitter, is you're going to get real-time feedback. So if you have an audience that's there, that's going to use it, then great, go for it. But if you're just starting out, I feel like Twitter's not necessarily worth it just yet for you. I feel like grow an audience somewhere else and then use Twitter as your instant feedback platform once you have users. So it really depends on where you stand in terms of your social media following.
Okay. And my last question to you now is, which is the SaaS product that's your favorite that has nailed branding, and why do you feel that they've nailed branding?
I think so. It's a smaller product. It's called Snovio, and I use this pretty often. So it allows you to collect emails and things like that. I think they've done a phenomenal job on their brand, especially when you go and see all the different touch points that they have. So for example, from their website, they have a newsletter, they have an amazing YouTube channel. That YouTube channel is incredible. They have tons of tutorials for how to use Snovio, but also tutorials on how to do email marketing and how to actually work with all of that, which is similar to Buffer Strategy, where they're giving you more valuable content that doesn't have to do with them. I also feel like they're very easily recognizable. They have a very clear voice. And I really feel like they nail every piece of it. And if you go on their website, their message is very clear and it's a very simple site. So I think they're doing a great job, especially now. They're also just getting on TikTok, I think. I think I saw a TikTok ad recently. So yeah, they're doing everything that they should be doing, especially now and moving forward. So.
Interesting. The whole YouTube thing is a very interesting one if they are creating, a lot of tutorials, because I don't think a lot of SaaS businesses invest very actively in video content, where they can help their target audience with their product, plus everything that revolves around their product. So which is a very great thing. Sadly, TikTok, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. What were you going to say? I'd love to hear.
No, I was just saying that sadly, TikTok is kind of banned in India. So the SaaS businesses in India can't use TikTok, they have to stick to either Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts if you want to create a short form content. So do you have any alternatives for them? I don't think there is any. What do you have?
I honestly don't at the moment, but I would say triple down on Instagram if that's the case. And really get to know your target audience, because I mean, at that point, it just comes down to doing more research and understanding psychology too, because it's not really an algorithm thing. It's more of a people thing. So if you get people down and you know what people like, especially your audience, it doesn't really matter what platform you're on. As long as they're there, you will attract them. So really understand the psychology of the people that you're serving. So what are their motivators? What gets them out of bed in the morning? What gets them to buy and pull out their wallet? And truly understand these things, because then you can implement them pretty easily.
Okay. One last question that I would like to ask you. Sorry, I said that was the last question.
No worries.
And my last question to one more question that just popped up in my head as you were, talking about all of this, is on the pricing side of the SaaS business. Do you think that a branding can help a SaaS owner figure out their pricing point?
Yes, I at least think it can help you increase your pricing. Because if you have, now figuring out pricing is more of a business strategy, and also you're again, a research thing. So it's like once you get, your industry and figure out what your competitors charge, you can find a competitive price. But if you have a really, really solid brand, I mean, like Salesforce, for example, can charge quite a bit and Slack can charge quite a bit per user because they have such a strong brand.
Yeah.
So if you really take the time to develop something like that, you can increase your pricing. But starting off, that is kind of a competitive advantage thing. So get an idea of the landscape and see what other people are doing so you can position yourself.
I agree with the fact that pricing has to do a lot with on the business strategy side, but branding can always help you, boost up your pricing. I want to understand, like, since you've mentioned, multiple times about market research, are there any tools that you recommend for SaaS business owners or that you yourself use for market research?
So I think, especially if you're a SaaS owner and somebody who's a little bit lower budget, because I'm usually working with startups, so it's smaller teams. There are two main tools that I'm using. The first one's called TweetDeck, which is just a Twitter analyzer. And that's kind of something I use for the social listening piece of things. So you can go and find industry information. If you just look up your industry, you can find your industry code, and that's how you find industry info. But from there, you go and do some social listening stuff, which is like TweetDeck, see what people are saying about your competitors and things like that, some gaps that you can fill. The other one I use is LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which is just something that we can essentially plug in our target personas perfectly into there. Find a list of 50, 100 people. And usually if we're doing interviews, we do about 10 interviews. So we'll sit down and interview those 10 people and then use the other 100 to send out a survey and validate those interviews. So Sales Navigator, TweetDeck, and if you look up your industry code on Google, those three things are actually really very, very useful, especially for people with not as high of a budget. But there are tools out there that are a few thousand a month where you can get everything in one place. But those are the three I use mostly.
Could you just elaborate on the last one? Because I don't think I got that. The
industry
yeah.
one? Okay, yeah. So essentially, let's say you're marketing or something like that. So if you go online and you look up, marketing industry, it's usually one of the first few links. You can go in and there's a code there. At least this is how it's worked for US businesses. I'm not 100% sure, honestly, for overseas. But once you get that code, you can go online and just look up, industry information on Google. There's a few websites out there where you can put in your industry code. And when you put that in, it'll give you information on, what your market looks like, who are the main players in your market, your competitive landscape. And it just essentially tells you, is this a good market to be in and where is it going to go in the next few years? So doing something along those lines in the beginning at least tells you if you have a good product market fit. And then from there, go into social listening and interviews.
Thank you. Thank you for that elaborated answer. That just helped me get a lot of clarity. Any last thoughts that you would like to share?
Overall, I think brand strategy should stop being looked at as marketing strategy because they're two different things. And this is something that I've had an issue with recently. So I've been trying to, talk about it a little bit more. But I feel like brand strategy is your story. So really, kind of switching up that association is important. So use brand strategy to tell your story and use marketing to get your story out there. Is how I see it.
Thank you. Thank you for those insightful tips and, everything that you've just shared. Thank you so much. It was a lot of learning for me as well, though I work with SaaS businesses, but it was more of a learning, episode for me. Thank you for sharing your info here and, all the insights and your work experience with me and everyone who's going to listen to this. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. This was a really good time and it's a good conversation.
Same here. Thank you. That was a super insightful podcast, valuable podcast for me. I hope you feel the same. Do not forget to comment below your learnings, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for upcoming episodes. Stay tuned and I'll see you soon. This is Divya Shah signing off.